President Trump taking yet another swipe at Fed Chair Jay Powell, calling him incompetent and crooked. Joining us now, Congressman French Hill is the chairman of the Financial Services Committee. And Congressman, it's good to see you.
Joe, Happy New Year. Good to be with you.
Yeah, you too. I was doing the math. So you worked with Jay Powell going all the way back to the first Bush, which was, I was trying to figure that out. It's at least 35 years.
A few semesters ago.
Yeah,
exactly.
Many moons ago. I think your comment was he's a person of the highest integrity, and the subpoenas could undermine this and future administration's ability to make sound monetary policy decisions. Across the board, I think on both sides of the aisle, heard a lot of things. I guess even Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent reportedly talked to the president and said there's a lot on the plate of the Treasury Department. We don't need this. You think there's anything to this at all? I read one Republican lawmaker who said that I'm sure I doubt he hasn't done well and he's been evasive and he didn't think he was a great Fed chair, but he said he probably hasn't done anything criminal. That's about the worst thing I could find anyone to say.
Well, look, the Fed independence doesn't mean the Fed or the Fed governors or the chairman are immune from criticism. That's absolutely the fact, and I've disagreed with Jay over many years about the direction of bank supervision or certainly the direction of monetary policy as we came out of the pandemic at the end of 2020 and early 2021. I think they were too slow to take their foot off the gas, combined with Joe Biden's excessive spending, and I think that contributed to the 40-year high in inflation. But with that said, the Congress does oversight of the Fed on a regular basis, and the idea that we want to get to the details of the construction project at the Fed and understand that completely, that's a perfectly good oversight set of questions. But in terms of being evasive, following that Senate testimony last year, the Fed released a whole series of frequently asked questions and a chronology of all the steps they had taken regarding those Fed building projects, which are expensive. And, building anything is expensive after Biden's inflation, and building anything in Washington, D.C. with all the government regulations and environmental reviews and historic preservation issues, of course, is colossally expensive. And no one in Congress has a lot of patience for high construction costs. But that doesn't, in my judgment, rise to the level of accusing someone of a crime.
So we don't know how this how this plays out. I guess at this point we don't know what the Department of Justice might.
But we should be focused on
to do nothing.
Yeah. I mean, I think Scott Bessent's right. It's a distraction. Scott Bessent's right. We should be working in the executive and legislative branch on the goals that President Trump has and that we have, which is how do we recover from that Biden inflation, lower the cost of living for American citizens through, like my bill, 21st century housing that literally cuts the cost of constructing housing, makes housing more accessible, more available across the country. That's what we ought to be focused on.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, a distraction from what? What else? Things with crypto, too, I guess, in your view.
Yeah, we've got, it's a good week in crypto in the sense that Senator Tim Scott is having a markup this coming Thursday, tomorrow, on the crypto legislation that we sent to the Senate last July. This is the market structure. This is the rules of the road for dealers, individuals, on how they will use digital assets and what the fit-for-purpose regulatory structure would be. So I'm really looking forward to that debate in the Senate tomorrow, and I hope this means that we're moving closer towards having a law that President Trump can sign, which is one of his commitments, to have both a stablecoin bill signed into law and a market structure bill. And then we can turn to community banking. How do we make community banks successful, more successful in this country? Because, Joe, when it comes to housing, banks under $10 billion, they make 60% of those 1 to 4 family housing construction loans. And so to me, housing and banking are linked as we try to come out from underneath the Biden regulatory system, the Biden inflation, and get this economy moving again in 2026.
The president, I don't know, he says he didn't know about this, but he's aware of what he wants to get done, too. Do you expect that this gets put to rest pretty quickly, and that's what a lot of people would like, Republicans as well, that it's just put to bed and there's nothing here.
Well, we need to put it to bed quickly, and I'll tell you why, because it's disrupting our work of oversight of the Fed. I anticipate Chairman Powell will not testify before the House and Senate in February because of this grand jury impanelment accusing him of perjury. And I think that's going to cause him to not come before Congress for his biannual statutory obligated hearing, the Humphrey Hawkins hearing, where he comes to the House and comes to the Senate and talks about the economy, bank supervision, the important changes that we need to make in both those areas.
Congressman, let me ask you a very specific question. I don't know if you saw yesterday that former President Clinton and Hillary Clinton wrote a letter to Representative Comer about their investigation about Epstein and his efforts to try to get them to testify. And you'll see the connection in a moment. In the letter, they say, quote, "The Justice Department has been used as a weapon at the direction of the president to pursue political opponents." Do you believe that to be true?
Well, I think the Epstein case is, and the Clintons' involvement in it is just another, what I think is a big issue in Congress and around the country. People want these files released, and the Clintons are involved in it because the American people demanded Congress open every single file and have the least amount of redaction so that they can find out who was going back and forth with Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted pedophile. And, you know, this is transparency that the American people wanted. I don't think that's geared towards the Justice Department engagement there and being used as a weapon at all.
Maybe not in that case, but I think Andrew's point is do two wrongs make a right? Should the president be looking for retribution based on the weaponization of the Justice Department under the Biden administration? Or should he say, yeah, it happened then, but I'm not going to fall privy to the same thing now? Because it almost looks like it's a tit for tat that he's attempting.
Yeah. Well, fair point. And I've always said, look, the best way to have retribution against your opponents is deliver on the promises we make to the American people, that we want to make the cost of living go down, that we want a more competitive system, we want more jobs, more careers, more housing available. And President Trump, when he was campaigning in 2024 and as he got elected, said that is what he was going to do. He said that my biggest retribution is going to be winning on the policy proposals I've made in the 2024 campaign. I think that's the direction we should take.